Hi, I'm Eliot from Magoosh, and in this video, we're going to think about the 5 top mistakes people make on the IELTS listening section. The first mistake people make is that they don't make predictions about the questions. So what does that mean? Well, as you probably are aware of, on IELTS listening, you have to answer questions as you're listening to the speakers talk. There's no time at the end to really think about answers and take notes and respond to your notes and really put a lot of thought into those questions. You have to answer them as the speakers are talking. So a key strategy for this is to make predictions about what you expect the answer to be about. Now, of course, you're not going to know the exact answer. That's going to be provided to you by the speakers. You have to listen for that. But what people fail to do, and what causes real problems for people on the listening section, is that they don't think about each question and look ahead, making predictions about what the conversation is going to be about. As you know, each IELTS set of questions is listed for you. You get to see all 10 questions for that particular section displayed at one time. So you can look ahead and make predictions about what you think is going to happen in the monologue or in the conversation. Every set of questions will give you some clues. You just have to read ahead and to think through and make predictions about what you think is about to happen. You may be wrong or you may be right, but what's important is that you've got some idea in your head about what to expect, and even if that turned out to be the wrong thing and you didn't make the right prediction, that you're still going to be thinking about what's next so you don't lose your place. Okay, and that's actually a key to the second tip that I'm giving, the second mistake we're going to talk about. And that is that people don't often use the time in between each section in order to make predictions on the section that's coming up next. So one of the parts of the listening test is that in between each of the 4 parts, there's a little bit of time. And some people use that time to look back at the last section and check the spellings and make sure their answers were correct, right? Don't do that. If you can avoid doing that, you should, because that time in between each section is a perfect time to read ahead. You may have 30 seconds where you can read all 10 questions in the next section, and you can begin making predictions about what you expect to hear and what you think the conversation is going to be about. So tip number 2 is in the quiet time they give you in between each section, that 30 seconds, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, you should be looking ahead and not looking back to the questions you've already answered. The third mistake people make is that they get lost in the questions as the speakers are talking. So this is easy to do, and it's understandable, right? You're supposed to be answering questions as you listen. So the speakers are talking and you're trying your hardest to follow along and understand what they're saying. And they're probably using some words that are difficult and unfamiliar to you. And so maybe you lose your place. Losing your place is especially troublesome on the IELTS listening section because all of the answers on the section you're working on are going to come in order. In other words, they're going to come in the same order that the speaker provides them in the passage. So, for example, you'll find the answer to question number 4. The speaker will provide that answer to you, and then later in the dialogue or in the text, after the answer was provided for question 4, you'll get the information that will help you answer question number 5. Okay, so if you lose your place and you get lost in that passage, you're potentially going to miss out on future answers because you don't know where the speaker is and in what question you ought to be answering. Okay, so this gets back to our strategy of using the time to look ahead in the questions and also to make predictions. And we add another little detail here because what you need to be doing on your IELTS listening questions is to plan ahead and always keep your eye on what that next question is going to be. So if you believe you are supposed to be answering question number 5, that you're waiting for the speakers to provide that answer, you should also take a quick look at question number 6 to know what should be coming next. If you get lost and if you lose your place, you may be able to get back on track because you recognize, wait a minute, I didn't hear the answer for 5. I think I just heard the answer for question number 6. If that's the case, you should continue listening, think about what you're hearing, and if it turns out that you did miss question number 5 in this case, you need to guess on that and continue listening on. Don't miss the rest of the answers in that section because you got lost. Okay, so mistake number 3 is getting lost, and the tip is to make those predictions. Use your time in between each section to plan ahead, but then as you're answering questions, make sure you know what that next question is, the question that comes after what you think you should be answering in that moment, so that you don't get lost and you don't lose your place in the dialogue. Okay, now the 4th mistake that people should avoid is to use the time at the very end of the listening test incorrectly. Okay, so what are we talking about here? On the paper and pencil test, they give you 10 whole minutes to go back through all 40 questions, and you can use that time to check for spelling. You can fill in answers that you may have missed, okay? This is the appropriate time to try to go back and think through things that you may have missed out on or misspelled or whatever, right? Earlier in this video, we talked about using the time in between each listening passage to look ahead. Well, at the very end of the test, that's the time to look back and fill in whatever's missing, fill in mistakes, check your spelling, because spelling, of course, is counted for your short answer questions. Now, there's a really important detail for all of the students out there who might be taking the computer-based test. So on the pencil and paper test, you get that 10 minutes at the end. And that's the time where you're checking answers, moving your answers. If you took notes in your test booklet, you put your final answers onto the test sheet they give you. On the computer test, there's no test sheet. You enter all your answers on the computer. So IELTS does not give you 10 minutes at the end of the listening section. They only give you about 2 minutes. And that's not a lot of time to go back. Now, you may go back through all your answers. It'll be on the computer screen. You can go back through and click on any of the questions that you answered in earlier sections. You can fill in anything that's missing, but keep in mind that you only have 2 minutes to do all of that stuff. So you need to use your time correctly. If you're taking the computer-based listening test, don't plan to use a lot of time at the end to correct spellings and do all of those things that you are able to do on the paper-based test, because time is limited. The time at the end of the computer-based test should purely be to do one final quick check of your answers before you move on. Okay, so understand that key difference and understand how to use that time at the end of the entire section. All right, and our 5th mistake is that people don't practice the listening skills and the listening section enough. Okay, so why is this a mistake? Well, you should be practicing the whole exam, of course, but this listening section is unique because you have to answer questions as you're listening to somebody talk. It's like juggling almost. You have to do 2 things at once that are difficult to do: reading and paying attention to questions, and listening to speakers talk about something that might use vocabulary that's difficult for you to understand or might be difficult for you to follow. It's really hard. It's even hard for native English speakers sometimes to pay attention to something like that and answer questions at the same time. Okay, so if you're taking the IELTS exam, it's because you're most likely not a native English speaker, and it's going to be even harder for you to do these things. So it takes practice. Just like learning a musical instrument or learning a sport, a physical skill, you have to practice the skill of answering questions while you listen to somebody talking. And the only way for some people to really master all of these, the timing and the strategy that goes into this, is to do it many, many, many times. So you should be focusing your attention on just getting a lot of repetition. And so the mistake to avoid in this case is to think, oh, well, I'm really good at listening. I can just really ace this section without a lot of practice. For most people, that's not the case. Avoid that mistake. Practice listening a lot, and in particular, the specific skills you need to do in order to answer IELTS listening questions. So to learn even more about the listening section and to get lots more ideas about where you can practice these difficult skills that we're talking about in this video, check out the resource we have for you down below. We've got a complete guide to the IELTS listening section on our blog, which is going to give you all the information you need in order to score really well on this tough part of the IELTS exam. And if you like this video, make sure you check out these other videos here, going to go even further in depth into the IELTS so that you can get the best score that you possibly can. Okay, we'll see you in the next video.